What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing an indie spotlight and I'm going to talk about 3 Kickstarter campaigns that have really caught my attention. So, before I start rambling too much, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and give me a like. This Kickstarter campaign I discovered through Twitter. I was scrolling through some things, I came across these creators, I clicked over to Kickstarter, and I was blown away. Because if you know me, then you know I love a good horror comic. And Don't Ever Blink is a very interesting concept to me, because it's a world that already has its own lore, it already has its own history, and there's so much that could be dug into if this first book is as good as it looks. So this is written by Brian Hawkins. The art is done by Richard Kemp. The letters are done by Guido Martinez. The graphic design is done by Jerry Nielsen. And the logos are designed by Tim Daniel, who I believe developed the logo for The Plot or The Plunge, one of those two. Either way, I did check out his page and I think his logo and graphic design work looks absolutely stunning, including the logo for Don't Ever Blink. The story here is that a killer sews the eyelids of victims shut and stalks a small town. However, when one of the victims actually survives, a mystery begins to unravel that not only shakes the foundation of the town, but may also have apocalyptic consequences. Don't Ever Blink is a 5-issue limited horror comic book series about a woman who survives a harrowing and horrific ordeal. The massacre of her fiance and his family while at a family get-together, but not without her also being scarred for life in more ways than one. So, looking through the sample pages, what I took from this is that there is a killer who basically stitches the eyes closed on his victims. That's his MO, that's his signature. And so he was being investigated and stuff. There was a team of cops that were on this. And then about 6 months ago, it all stopped and they haven't seen any indication of him being around anymore. When suddenly this young lady reports that, they find out her whole family was murdered. She was supposed to be killed, but she somehow escaped. Her eyes have been stitched closed just like the victims usually are, which indicates to me that the killer must stitch the eyes and then murder the victims. But she escapes with her life, and so now we're seeing these cops come back on the scene. They're trying to investigate and figure out what's really going on here and why this murderer disappeared for 6 months and now all of a sudden is back on the radar. So like I said, there's a lot of history already built into this story. It kind of reminds me, if I were imagining this play out based on everything I just described, I would say we're in True Detective territory, where they are investigating something that's happening now, but we're probably also going to get a lot of backstory on the earlier case and the earlier investigation, and trying to figure out who is doing this and if it's even the same person. So I'm really excited to read this because, again, I love a good horror comic. And this may be controversial, but horror comics to me are at their very best in digital format because I can turn off the lights, turn the AC down a little bit cool, put on some headphones maybe, and just sit there in the dark and read this on my tablet. And horror books work so well like that I would highly suggest you jump in on this at the digital level, because it's literally a $3 investment. For $3, just $3, you can get a great digital copy of this horror comic. And for $6, you can get the physical copy. Do I think the $6 physical copy is worth it? Absolutely. This book looks really cool and really interesting. The creators have some solid credentials, so I do believe they're going to deliver a quality product. This is issue number 1 of 5. Whether you're willing to spend $3 or $6, I don't think it matters, but I do believe you need to get over there now and go ahead and back this Kickstarter because this book has me truly excited. It's written by Ryan Little, and I didn't see a list of the rest of the creative team, which bothers me a little bit because I think everybody deserves credit for what they're doing, but I'm sure I'll be able to find out soon enough. This particular campaign is for the Axeman number 3, but as you'll see whenever I get to my Best Buy selections, there's a lot of options to get everything that you need to get caught up and follow this story from here moving forward. This is a 39-page story, and it's a sci-fi medical thriller. It's about patient zeros and pandemia. So this is, kind of topical, I guess, but make no mistake, this book has been being worked on and started way before everything that's going on today. So this isn't a jump on the trend. This is something that was already in the works before we got to this point in our global history. The story here is that there are more people on the planet than ever before. Thanks to the miracles of technology, our civilizations are mixing like never before, but something grows along with us. Viruses, pathogens, pandemics, and they're evolving faster than we can keep up with. That's why the shadow section of the CDC is tasked with monitoring any and all medical data in the USA to identify and cure newly evolving viruses before a plague can start. But what if something starts to grow that we can't find a cure for? This is where the Axeman comes in. He's a lethal hitman tasked with killing patient zeros before an outbreak can spread. The main character here is Jason, and Jason is a world-class Axeman, facing the nastiest sicknesses life can throw at him. He alone confronts illnesses with no hope for a cure, but the diseases are appearing faster and they're growing more violent, forcing the Shadow CDC to prepare for a bio-war. So essentially what you have going on here is whenever a new virus or bacteria is discovered that could potentially jump into humans, they try to find a cure for it before it becomes a problem. Unfortunately, some viruses are uncurable, and so at that point it becomes a mission of eliminating the patient zero so that the virus can no longer spread, and that is what our Axeman in this story does. He goes and he takes out these patient zeros before things get too crazy, because what the CDC is really trying to do here is prevent biological warfare from taking over the world. This seems like a really interesting book. I know a little bit about Ryan Little. He has a series called Prometheus that really interests me. He also has another series called Super Scouts, I believe. And that series, I actually have both copies of that. I thought it was pretty good. It's not his best work, but what I see in the sample pages here definitely seem like he's growing as a creator, and this seems like the next evolution in what he's doing. So my best buys on this one, this is a little bit pricier than some of the other Kickstarters that I've seen, but I do think there's a lot of value in what you're paying for here. So the first one that I would suggest is the $18 Plastic Sword Press Presents Bundle A. With this one, it's $18 and you get digital copies of Axeman 1, 2, and 3, and Prometheus 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if you can go all the way up to $50 to get your physical copy, I think there is another great bundle right here that will keep you entertained for a very long time. For $50 on the physical cure, you'll get hard copies of the entire vault. That's a pretty good deal already, right? You get the Axeman 1, 2, and 3, Prometheus 1, 2, 3, and 4, the Crew Knight 1, 2, 3, and 4, Super Scouts 1 and 2, and a hardcover copy of Advanced Death Saves. So that's a pretty good deal. For $50, that is a lot of comics. That's probably somewhere in the realm of 500 pages worth of comic book storytelling. If you're a fan of comics, how could you pass up something like that? Seems like a great deal. I highly suggest you jump over to Kickstarter and check out the rest of the page. There is so much information here for you. Even if the books that I mentioned in these bundles don't appeal to you, there are other configurations for these bundles that offer different groupings of books and stuff so you can always find something that will meet your needs. I would not pass on this because Axeman looks like a great like just action thriller. And so I'm pretty excited to read this book and find out what's going on. I was scrolling through Kickstarter and I came across a campaign called The Young Offenders. This is written by Marco Stack, the art is by Mike Becker, and the letters are done by Jody Troutman. This is a prestige 44-page comic book, and the campaign caught my attention because not only is the campaign itself written in like very regular, plain language, but even a lot of the dialogue that I saw in the sample pages sounded like things that people really say. And I cannot stress enough how much I like regular, everyday dialogue. I think there needs to be a purpose and a point, but at the same time, hearing people say things that I feel like I would also say, that really draws me into the story. And so that really caught my attention in this campaign. The story itself is about the Young Offenders, who are kind of a take on Young Justice or Young Avengers. The story starts with a big battle. There's something that appears, some kind of great evil. All the superheroes go out to fight it, and in the battle, all of the heroes and villains disappear. 6 months later, you have all these younger characters, probably in their like late teens, early 20s, and you know, they're kind of described as burnout heroes. They have powers, they have abilities, but they kind of desire to do nothing other than, you know, play in a band or hang out with friends or whatever else we all wasted our time on in our younger years. So I think that's very relatable because I think we've all been through that phase in our life, at least if you're older than like 25, probably 27. So I think this is going to be a really relatable story. I read the sample pages. I really enjoyed what I saw there because it is like truly organic interactions. And again, the dialogue between these characters is awesome. So you had this big event, all the heroes and villains disappear. 6 months later, most of the world has adjusted because I'm sure they miss the heroes and stuff, but at the same time, there's no property damage or destruction because there's no super villains and superheroes fighting each other all the time. So the world's kind of readjusted 6 months later when a portal suddenly opens up in the sky and one of the heroes that disappeared falls from the sky as well as one of the supervillains. And so as a battle ensues there, the young offenders are kind of called to action. And so they have to go in and fight. And so they have to kind of become the heroes that the world needs, but probably not necessarily the heroes that the world wants. I think this is a really interesting story. I think this is going to be a lot of fun because these characters seem truly relatable. The cast here is Victor. He's a narcissistic demon boy who just wants to front his emo band. There's Elaine, a slow learner with an armored supercomputer in her brain. Jane is a type A legacy character. It seems like basically like her father is Batman, and so she kind of takes charge, but at the same time she's trying to fill those shoes and she feels uncertain about herself. There's Colin. He's an invulnerable college dropout who has been running away from his parents' plan for him. So you can see a lot of relatability there because we all are expected to do something, I think, but most of us don't live up to our parents' expectations, but we tend to find more happiness in our own. And then, of course, there's Esperanza, a witch who doesn't need magic to make her friends disappear. And this is great. She seems a lot like a take on Raven, that not only is she kind of isolated, but she's also really good at pushing people away. And so I'm kind of excited to see how that character plays out as well. This Kickstarter is very robust. If you scroll through this campaign, you will see there's a lot of information here, a lot of sample pages, and I couldn't possibly cover it all in this video, but I did want to go ahead and highlight what I think are the best buys at the end of this campaign. So, in this campaign, there's several different tiers. I picked out what I think is going to be the best bang for your buck. I think that if you like digital comics, the $10 digital collection is great. For $10, you're getting The Young Offenders, The Secret of May Rain, Heracles, and Weekend Warrior. So that's over 150 pages worth of comics, all created by different members of the creative team on this one. It is digital format, but for $10, you can't beat that. So if you like PDF and digital comics, I think this is a great buy right here. If you do have to have the physical, if that's just your thing, I totally understand that. And for $20, there is a great package here. You get a print copy of the 36-page Weekend Warrior comic #1, and you get a physical copy of The Young Offenders. So those are two great bargains. $10 for 150 pages of digital content. Mathematically, I think the physical is $20 for about 75 pages worth of content. So either of those are a great steal. I would not pass up adding these to your collection, because as I looked through the campaign, I read the sample pages, and it looks like it's going to be so much fun. So jump over to Kickstarter and back this as soon as possible. And today I want to talk a little bit about, actually I guess two things, but they kind of coalesce into one. I was on Twitter the other day, and an indie creator posted something that really struck a chord with me. You know, you have your companies like Marvel and DC and Scholastic that are putting out, you know, tons of content all the time. They're following these stories, but because they have these very like corporate structures, these giant ships are very hard to turn. So when you have something like a pandemic that shuts down the entire world, well, it's very difficult for these big corporate companies to change direction. And honestly, I think that's a big part of what's going on with DC and Marvel right now, is the fastest way for a structure that large to kind of change direction and readjust is to just cut some stuff. If it were a smaller publisher, I think they would be able to readjust and change very quickly and adapt to the situation. And I think we've seen a lot of that during this pandemic. But for these bigger companies, it's really hard to just completely readjust everything. So I do think a big part of what we're seeing right now is cut, and then we can rebuild back to what we can handle under the current circumstances. And so that kind of brings me into the next thing I want to talk about with all of this, is how many of these Kickstarter campaigns have gone with these prestige formats. And I think this is something that we're going to see on a much larger scale moving forward. Whenever I hear people talk about DC books, 9 times out of 10, they're talking about a Black Label book. And what people are really seeming to like about the Black Label book, more than even just the quality alone, is the format. These prestige format books, people are loving. I think that there is some great storytelling that happens in 22 pages of comic, but I think there's a lot of stories that benefit so much by going up to 30 to 40 pages, maybe even, 50 pages. But to publish a book at that size, I think makes for better storytelling, because you get so much more out of it. And that's something I've noticed. Not only have a lot of the what I call small press companies, you have your Image, Boom Studios, IDW. Those to me are small press. They're not indie, because they have corporate structures as well. They're publishing books on a grand scale. The only thing about them that is independent is that they're not with Marvel and DC. But I think as we've seen, the indie market has exploded over the last couple of years. And no longer do I think just not being Marvel DC is something to be proud of. I think you have to be doing something completely different. And I think a lot of what Boom and Image are doing right now is different. But I've also seen a lot of their books grow in page count. I've seen Marvel and DC especially succeed most on a larger page format. And so I think what we're seeing on Kickstarter, a lot of books are going to 30 to 40 pages. And I think a big part of that reason is to help justify the cost in a way. Because I think, especially on Kickstarter and on these smaller presses, if you offer a $10 book at 22 pages, that's a tough sell, because people can walk into a store and pick up a book, the same size book, for $5. But I also think that's indicative of where the industry is headed, because we've seen Scholastic is the biggest publisher. Everybody that thinks that Marvel and DC are big really needs to go check the numbers on Scholastic. They are putting out way more and selling way more copies of sequential art storytelling than either of those big two, you know. So I suspect that's where the whole industry is headed. I think your regular floppies are going to turn into 30 to 40 pages, probably somewhere between like 32 and 42 pages for most comics. And so I think that's kind of where the industry is headed on that front. I think if you look at stuff like Pulp and Firepower, which have had great graphic novel releases in the last couple of months, I see that being a big part of the industry as well. I think you're going to see more publishers looking to hire and publish content that tells a more complete story less often. I think most people feel like they want things to stay the way they are. But honestly, I believe if you got, 4 books a year from one series, but you were getting up to 50 pages each time, I think people would enjoy that more because you would get a more complete storytelling adventure. I could even see where we're getting 2 graphic novels from some series. You hear the term trade weight a lot, and I think that's a big problem for the publishers themselves, because what they want to do is sell the floppy copies. They want people in that store every week buying these books because that's a constant flow of cash. And from a business perspective, I get it. But from a customer perspective, I don't think the same value is there that they think they're delivering on. And I think you're going to see more and more people, especially as our economy fluctuates a lot in the coming probably 2 years. We're going to see a lot of shifting and changing. And I think that's when the industry is going to start to evolve and say, I would rather have a customer come in and spend $15 or $20 on a graphic novel every 2 to 3 months versus trying to get them in the door and keep them on a series for 5 and 6 books. We even see where somebody like a publisher like TKO is doing a great job of putting out these collections so you can simply binge read the whole thing. And I think that's also great for the creators. Just like Netflix, one of the greatest things that Netflix did was they said, we're going to ignore a lot of the metrics and we're going to give you 5 episodes or 10 episodes for a season to see how people will like this. They fund that whole season, and that way the whole story gets told, because oftentimes what will happen is, say a series on a traditional network comes out, you'll see a lot of people tune in for the premiere, and then it slowly, just like comics, it drops off episode 2, 3, 4, and you might see people complain, oh, this isn't that great and stuff, and then by the time the season wraps, people are like, oh no, like it all came together at the end, but so many people have fallen off, the network has already canceled it. And so I kind of see the same thing in comics. I feel like people get really excited about the number 1. They usually pick up the number 2 if it was good, maybe 3. Usually by 4 or 5, though, most of the fan base has fallen off. And so something like TKO following that Netflix model of saying, we are going to pay you to create 5 books and you're going to tell this whole story. And if people respond well to it, then we'll give you another series. We'll give you 5 more books down the road. But at least you can sit down and say, I'm going to write a complete story here, and everybody will have the chance to get that, instead of the series getting canceled at 4 books and they didn't even get the whole story when it all kind of comes back together. So that's something I see as, Kickstarter, the independent self-publishing route, that is something that can turn on a dime. These creators can go, oh wait, look, people aren't responding well to $10 for 22 pages, but if I crank this story up to 32 pages, they're more than happy to give me that $10, and I feel like as a creator, I can create a better story and a better experience for them. So I think this is the early warning that in the future, you're probably going to see the bigger corporate style companies and publishers move toward. That's my thoughts on it. I'm really interested to see and hear what other people have to say. I'm not saying I'm not saying that floppies are going away or that there's no space in the market for them, but I do think we're going to see a lot of cutback on how many floppies are coming out, and I think we are going to see an increase in how many collections and graphic novels are coming out. So what do you guys think? Do you see the same trend yourself? Do you think that I'm completely off base with thinking that smaller publishers kind of set the trend and we see it grow? Or do you think that Marvel and DC are the trend setters and that's what everybody's looking for? Let me know in the comments below. Hit me up on social media here on YouTube, New Guy, on Twitter and Instagram, same name, NUEXGUY. Until next time, keep turning pages.